am Mittal from the Biochemistry Department, University of Allahabad. Welcome to the paper number 12 of this course in Women's Studies, which deals with women's science and technology. The rationale for the inclusion of this paper needs to be elaborated at the outset. That is the purpose of this module. The paper is divided into two sections. Section 1 predominantly deals with various aspects concerning the representation of women in scientific careers. Section 2 focuses on feminist research methodology, which is a developing, inspiring and revolutionary academic subdiscipline. Let us begin by trying to understand the various connotations of the word science. Science is a way of pursuing knowledge. Science is the intellectual and practical activity encompassing the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment. It derives from the science word scientia, which means knowledge. It comprises of a body of knowledge that can be rationally explained and reliably applied. It is a powerful instrument of growth and development, and the pursuit of science requires the attitude to question everything. That is what is seen in, that is what can lead to new knowledge. Science and scientific temper. The term science has been extended to describe the scientific temper, which can be a way of life, which should be a way of life. Scientific temper describes an attitude which involves the application of logic. Discussion, argument and analysis are vital parts of scientific temper. Elements of fairness, equality and democracy are built into it. The scientific temper should be a driving force of inquiry. From this perspective, science is an attitude that should be inculcated at an early age. It is not limited to a student of science. The cartoon below, it shows a scientist indulging in an unscientific behavior. He is scared of the black cat which crosses his path. Jawaharlal Nehru is actually credited with the term scientific temper, which he uses in his book The Discovery of India, where he emphasizes the need for the scientific temper. He says what is needed is a scientific approach, the adventurous and yet critical temper of science, the search for truth and new knowledge, the refusal to accept anything without testing and trial, the capacity to change previous conclusions in the face of new evidence, the reliance on observed fact and not on preconceived theory, the hard discipline of the mind. All this is necessary not merely for the application of science, but for life itself and the solution of its many problems. However, a more commonly used meaning of the word science is to describe it as a branch of study. Science forms part of the curriculum beginning at school level and is viewed as just another subject. Subject loaded with facts, many people find it too boring, too difficult. Students who study science as a subject at the tertiary level and beyond are inducted into careers that constitute scientific careers. In the context of this paper and in common parlance, science is a profession, although attempt is made to bring the scientific temper in the area of gender studies, and this is what we are trying to do in this paper. Now, technology, it is the application of scientific knowledge for practical purposes, especially in industry. The term includes advances in computer technology, machinery, devices developed using scientific knowledge. Science and technology has more recently been replaced by STEM, as you have several modules which in this paper, where STEM is an acronym for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It includes all branches of endeavor where a background of science at the secondary school level is required. The concern of this paper is the presence of women in the fields of science, technology, and STEM as a whole, because these careers are generally regarded as being male dominated. We need to break the cycle of sexism in STEM. That is the basis and the central theme of this paper. The methodology employed to gauge discrimination against women in science and technology and STEM is that the number of women who opt to study any discipline as a subject, how many are they as compared to the men, the number who are retained in the discipline at tertiary levels, the number who find employment in any particular occupation requiring the study of that discipline, and their numbers in the higher echelons of the discipline, that is, recipients of awards, presence in decision-making bodies, and the person who reach the highest administrative positions. The assumptions about science: why does science have to be studied separately in the paper on in gender studies? This issue occupies so much space in public discourse because there are deep-rooted and widespread assumptions that science and scientific careers are superior to other disciplines such as the humanities and commerce. Little children are encouraged to become engineers and doctors when they grow up. Parents take pride when they actually do become doctors and engineers. In schools, the better students opt for science. They are perceived to lead to better employment opportunities, higher salaries, higher status in society. Science careers are more male dominated, and since they attract the best students, so women who excel in science must be as good as or better than men. These are the assumptions. Now, a deficit of women in a male-dominated, high-prestige profession leads to resentment among women and a dominating arrogance among the male gender. This widens the gender gap. So, the course in women's studies needs to dispassionately investigate these issues, and there is need to have a paper on women's science and technology in this course. Section 1 of this paper, Women's Science and Technology, comprises of 14 modules, of which the introductory module is at number 1. Module 2 talks of women in science education. It presents data to show that there is no dearth of females who do very well academically, often better than males in school and college, but their numbers in the higher education remains lower than men, and this is disturbing. The module deals with possible reasons that are responsible for the lower number of women in advanced stages of the scientific ladder. It also describes facts that support the competence of women and discuss extra academic hurdles to their progress. Module 3, Women in Science and Technology in India. This further extends on the theme in Module 2 and discusses constraints that women face. It discusses reasons for their high dropout rates from science at later stages, especially in India. It presents recommendations and efforts to overcome these, discusses data to support the proverbial glass ceiling, which blocks the rise of women in various science establishments. It describes government-led measures and other recommendations to stem the exodus of women out of careers in science. Module 4 is titled Underrepresentation of Women in STEM 1, Problems and Solutions. It assesses 3 themes to explain the lower number of women in STEM fields. 1. the notion that males have an innately superior mathematical ability, or 2, that girls lack interest in STEM, or 3, workplace bias and issues related to work-life balance are the reasons for the underrepresentation. It highlights flaws with the first theme. It shows that greater male variance theory is an important aspect to be studied. It makes fresh attempt at explaining how studies in cognitive gender bias should be explained. It draws attention to research which suggests that even in supportive environments, women cite feelings of isolation as a reason for attrition. And it takes up the relationship between workplace environment and possible stress among women who work in highly male dominated occupations. Module 5 is a continuation, underrepresentation of women in STEM. 2, strategies for improvement. It stresses desirable empowerment for women in STEM. It describes various recommendations that may increase presence of women in STEM, which include conducting outreach programs, addressing peer culture, improving departmental culture, mentoring, providing exposure to female role models, creating awareness about ways to counter bias, initiating special programs to encourage practice of science, and taking steps to reduce stress on women scientists and students. Module 6 is the third part of underrepresentation of women in STEM, and it deals with unconscious biases. It further elaborates upon bias as a reason for the lower number of women and the dominance of men in science and math. It highlights how biases can be unconscious, they can be involuntary. It describes studies which suggest that there are brain regions associated with bias which may be hardwired but reversible. It describes ways to raise awareness of implicit biases, types of unconscious biases, ways to measure them, and ways to eliminate or minimize them. Module 7 talks of women, science, and leadership issues. It deals with the characteristics required to assume leadership roles. It presents statistics to show that there is underrepresentation of women in leadership positions. It discusses various challenges faced by women to reach and sustain leadership positions, leading to the glass ceiling effect, such as workplace relationships, geographical constraints, internal motivation, lifestyle conflicts, discrimination, etc. It talks of the double bind, which shows that many attributes required for leadership conflict with the natural attributes of femininity. And it also talks of what is known as the sticky floor, which is another concept which is the opposite of the glass ceiling. It elaborates upon to show why women are not successful as leaders. Module 8 talks of role models, women scientists in the global sphere. The module cites dearth of women role models as one of the causes that reduce motivation for scientific careers in women. It deals with the importance of having role models and the comparative dearth of women role models as compared to male role models. It describes 7 women role models from the International Scientific Pool. It also describes possible gender discrimination against some of these role models and the effect of the feminine movement in the West. Module 9 is again role models, women scientists, this time from India. This module describes the scenario for Indian women with regard to education from pre-independence years to the present. It includes examples of Indian women such as Anandibai Joshi, who was born 1865 and went on to become the first Indian woman doctor. It traces the journey of several women achievers of Indian origin through the years till the present time, who can serve as role models for the present generation. Module 10 talks of women, science and sexism, and it talks of institutional needs to address gender-related issues. Sexism is considered to be a major reason for deterring the entry and hindering the progress of women in science. This issue has therefore resulted in various remedial measures at institutional levels. The module presents reasons to show that the phenomena of gender bias is a man-made problem. It describes various dimensions of workplace sexism, and it suggests strategies that institutions need to adopt to tackle these problems. Module 11 talks of sexual harassment in STEM institutions. It describes specific instances of sexual harassment by senior male faculty where the victim was in a junior position. It discusses various forms of harassment, reasons why such harassment goes unnoticed or underreported or unreported, and it also suggests ways to increase awareness of remedies available to girls in subordinate positions. In various modules of this course, you will be exposed to arguments and data to show that scientific careers are male dominated. The general tenor of the foregoing modules highlights the underrepresentation of women in science and suggests ways and means to bring women to the level of men in terms of employment and in terms of their presence in the high echelons of the discipline. The gender gap in scientific fields has been regarded as a source of resentment against men. The last three modules endeavor to emphasize the need for a deeper analysis of the data that suggests discrimination against women. A dispassionate scrutiny is vital to creation of a harmonious world in which both genders coexist without being in a combative mode. Module 12, Gender Studies in Physics Education Research. This module describes studies which show that men consistently score more than women in standardized tests of conceptual understanding in physics. Further, it describes studies which are conducted to identify the factors responsible for the observed gender gap and interventions for bridging this gap. The module also describes critiques by physics education research investigators of the gender gap studies. And finally, it emphasizes the need for scientific temper and unbiased approach for proper design of gender investigations, interpretation of results, and their implications for policy. In short, it tries to say that there could be methodological problems which are leading to the result of gender gap. Module 13, Biological Basis of Gender, Perspectives in Women's Studies. This module explains the biological basis of sex determination. It shows that the investment of the mother is much more than that of the father, and how it shows how this makes way for beginning of gender differences. So, how sex differences make for gender differences. It argues how sex and gender are not exclusive. Gender issues cannot be divorced from biological facts. It assesses the nature versus nurture conundrum with regard to gender stereotyped adjectives such as aggressive, competitive, emotional, sympathetic, docile, etc. And it explains their statistical nature. It shows that some traits may be more frequent in one gender, but a large number of individuals in the other gender may also have them. It shows a high dependence on nurture. It stresses the gender stereotyping leads to creation of an unhealthy divide between the sexes and the central role of the female in the reproductive process, which must not be undermined. And it underlines the role of gender studies in advocating equity of opportunity based on individual inclinations within the ambit of sex differences and reproductive requirements to promote harmony and not acrimony between the sexes. Module 14, Scientific Careers versus Good for Women Careers, Characteristics and Gender Issues. It discusses the characteristics of careers in science. It traces the biological clock pressure, reproductive and child care responsibilities which can only take place in a particular time period of a woman's life span. It describes the leaky pipeline and also gender insensitive practices and sexist gender bias. It argues that some careers, including the non-remunerative career of homemaker, are naturally good for women because they align well with their biology and biologically determined roles and skills of women. It discusses the characteristics of some good for women careers such as teaching. It raises the question why, even though there are few men in these careers, yet there is no debate about discrimination against men in these professions. For example, there are less teachers than male teachers than female teachers at the lower levels. So, it asks whether there would be a cry about underrepresentation of women in other professions if women-friendly professions were accorded high status and remuneration commensurate with the importance and contribution of such professions. It concludes that the real problem is not the low representation of women in some professions, but unreasonably low status and financial rewards in women-friendly professions despite their contributions in society. Section 2 of this paper deals with feminist research methodology. This contains 6 modules. This is a fast developing field which is pertinent to both students and scholars of women's studies. The 6 modules in this section briefly cover the nature, methods, issues and debates that constitute part of this methodology. Module 15, which is Introduction to Feminist Research Methodology. It introduces the subject and it examines how feminist research methodology is different from the traditional methods employed for research in the social sciences and in the humanities. Module 16, Feminist Research Methodology, Issues and Debates. This module, as its title suggests, briefly provides an overview of the issues and current debates in feminist research methodology, the areas that are contested as well as those that find common acceptance. Module 17, Feminist Pedagogy and its Praxis. Feminist pedagogy and praxis is a way of thinking about teaching and learning, grounded in the principles of feminist theory. It is characterized by the resistance to hierarchy and the importance it gives to experience as a valuable resource. Module 18 deals with feminist approaches to data collection and interpretation. This module emphasizes how feminist research methods are different and how the collection of data and analysis in special ways yields results often lost during the traditional methods of gathering information. It enlists the variety of methods used in conducting research, the development of non-hierarchical relationships among teachers and students, and reflexivity about power relations not only in society, but also in the classroom. Module 19 deals with feminist approaches to epistemology. The traditional approaches of rationalism, empiricism, positivism have been critiqued by feminist scholars who have preferred the standpoint feminist epistemology and talked about positionality and situatedness in the conduct of research. The module introduces and explains these concepts. Module 20, the last module in this paper, is an interdisciplinary look at feminist methodology. It outlines and assesses the arguments for distinctively feminist methodology in an interdisciplinary framework. Studied together, these modules serve to provide the student with a bird's eye view of feminist research methodology as it exists today. It is hoped that these 6 introductory modules will enable the student to become aware of the nature of feminist research methods and see how they are in sync with the general philosophy of women's studies as a discipline. Thank you, and we hope you enjoy studying these modules as much as we enjoy developing them for you. Thank you.